What would you do if the family you once loved turned their back on you and now they're asking for help? Serafina, a 27-year-old woman, had been betrayed in the worst way possible. Her sister Brielle stole her fiancé, Jasper, on the very day Serafina got engaged. 3 years later, after cutting them all out of her life, she receives a desperate call from her mother, asking her to help the couple out of a financial crisis. But Serafina is done. They don't deserve her help. Stay tuned to see how Serafina stands her ground and why she's no longer looking back. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories. A few days ago, I got a call from my mother, someone I hadn't spoken to in almost 3 years. She called to ask for my help, saying my sister and her husband had just gone through something horrible. Let me give you some background. The man who is now my sister's husband, Jasper, was supposed to be my husband. My sister, Brielle, who is 23, got together with my fiancé on the very day I got engaged. Jasper and I had been together since college. After nearly 3 years, he finally proposed. He even threw me a surprise engagement party. The night of our engagement, I remember feeling on top of the world. I was excited, relieved, and ready to start this next chapter of my life. But around 2 p.m., I decided to step out into the backyard to get better reception on my phone. And that's when I saw them, my sister and my fiancé together. They were kissing so passionately that it took them a few seconds to even notice me standing there, completely frozen, completely in shock. I couldn't believe it. How could he do this to me? How could she do this to me? After all these years together, after everything we'd shared, this was what I was getting in return. When they finally noticed me, they quickly pulled apart, but the damage was done. I turned on my heel and ran to my car, my heart racing as I drove to the nearest hotel. I was numb. I was in complete disbelief, trying to convince myself it wasn't real. But then I got a text from Brielle. She apologized. She told me she was in love with Jasper. Apparently, this had been going on for a while. I sat there in my hotel room, reading her words, and then I completely broke down. The reality hit me like a ton of bricks. After that, I got a text from Jasper. He said almost the same thing, just as coldly and matter-of-factly. He told me he had only proposed to me because he thought if he committed to me, it would push Brielle out of his mind. But it didn't. It made him want her even more. He told me it wasn't about me, it was about them. They knew they were meant to be together. I was just a placeholder, a stepping stone to bring them together. I stayed in that hotel for days, trying to make sense of it all, trying to tell myself this was just some cruel joke life was playing on me. But after nearly 5 days of torturing myself in disbelief, I finally went back home. I needed to collect my things and get back to work if I didn't want to lose my job. When I got home, I was hit with the realization that my entire family, all of them, had been staying with Jasper under the same roof, waiting for me to come back. It might have been touching if it weren't for the fact that this was why I'd left in the first place. Everyone had been texting me non-stop, trying to get a response. But I hadn't replied to a single message. So when I finally came back, chaos erupted. Everyone crowded around me, hugging me, telling me how glad they were to see me again. Even Brielle had the audacity to approach me, tears in her eyes, giving me a big hug. I stood there in stunned silence. The world felt like it had stopped spinning. How could they just pretend everything was fine? Finally, when the noise died down, I cleared my throat. I had to get this out, had to make them understand. "I'm only here to get my things," I said, my voice steady. "I'm moving out for good." Jasper had been standing quietly up until that point, but as soon as I said I was leaving, he chimed in.
"You don't need to go,"
he said calmly, his voice almost smug. "I've already packed my things. I'm moving in with Brielle." It was as if the words were nothing more than a casual announcement, as if everything that had happened didn't matter. And there, in that moment, my entire family, my parents, my aunt, even my dad's youngest sister who had been living with us, smiled. They actually smiled. I could hardly believe it. There was nothing to smile about, at least not from my perspective. Brielle stood next to Jasper, looking at me with a sad expression, yet still smiling. And in that moment, I realized the truth. They had all chosen sides. They had chosen Jasper and Brielle, not because of love, but because they had already decided I was disposable. They were the family that had never really seen me as family at all. I couldn't take it anymore and asked my family what on earth they were smiling about because, as far as I could see, there was nothing to be happy about. I was upset because Brielle had just broken up my engagement and taken away my boyfriend of almost 3 years. There was nothing funny or sweet about it. My mother spoke up and told me that they couldn't change the past, but they could accept the future. They believed that the future had Brielle and Jasper together, and even though the relationship started with cheating, they felt sorry about it but wanted me to understand that this was for the best. Brielle apologized for taking my boyfriend, saying she couldn't help falling in love with him. She wished she had told me earlier so I didn't have to find out this way, but she said they were deeply in love and wanted to spend their lives together. Then they kissed right in front of me, and my mother even wiped a tear from her eyes. I snapped and told them that this wasn't something to be sentimental about. What they were doing was disgusting. To my surprise, my family got annoyed with me and said I was being bratty. Instead of being happy for my sister, they thought I was making it all about myself and didn't approve of my behavior. I was shocked by their attitude and told them all to get out of my house. I couldn't understand how they were defending Brielle and Jasper while making me look like the bad guy, acting like I was overreacting. My father stepped in and told me not to act like a child because things like this happen, and I should just accept it. He said I should be happy that my sister found her soulmate instead of being jealous. It felt like they were all acting crazy, and I couldn't deal with it anymore. So I said, "Screw it," went to my room, packed some of my things, and left again without talking to them or listening to what they had to say, even as they called my name and told me not to go. I didn't have anything left to say to them because it was clear that they cared more about Brielle and her happiness than about me or what was right and wrong. They were so focused on justifying what Brielle had done that they completely forgot that I had real feelings too. After that day, my family tried to contact me several times, but I never responded because I didn't think I owed them anything. A couple of weeks later, I even received an invitation to Brielle and Jasper's wedding, which I obviously declined. All the friends that Jasper and I had in common also declined the wedding invitation to support me, and even a few relatives who knew the truth stopped interacting with my family after they learned how I had been treated. It's been 3 years, and I've cut them out of my life completely. They occasionally try to get back in touch by wishing me well on my birthday or New Year, but I always ignore them. I never blocked any of them, though. I did remove them from my friends list. Since I have a public account, they could still see what I was up to, which is what I wanted. I wanted them to see that I was living a great life and let them feel jealous. It was a bit petty, but it was the least I could do after how they treated me. Until recently, I had no idea what Brielle and Jasper had been up to. But about 5 days ago, my mother called me from an unfamiliar number. When I picked up and realized it was her, my first instinct was to hang up. But she begged me, pleaded with me to give her a chance to talk. She sounded so frantic, so upset, that I reluctantly agreed to listen for a few minutes. I couldn't completely ignore her, even though everything inside me screamed to do so. She told me Brielle and Jasper had started a business a couple of years ago, but it had failed miserably. Investors were backing out because there was no profit. They had borrowed more money, but that hadn't worked either, and now they were drowning in debt. Loan sharks were after them. They were being hounded by everyone from employees to investors to the people they owed money to. I lived a comfortable life, and I could afford to help them out. My mother knew that, so she came to me as a last resort, begging me to lend them almost $95,000 to clear their debts. I took a moment to process her words. Then I asked, "Why isn't Brielle the one calling me if she needs help? Why is she making you ask me instead?" My mother hesitated before explaining that Brielle and Jasper didn't even know she was reaching out to me for help. They'd specifically told her not to. I guess they hadn't forgotten what happened 3 years ago. Brielle didn't want me involved, and she wasn't ready to take anything from me, but my mother had no other options. A few months had passed already, and Brielle and Jasper were struggling to put food on the table. My parents and Jasper's family were doing what they could, but it wasn't enough. They had their own futures to think about, especially since most of them, including Jasper's parents, were retired. That's why my mother, with no one else to turn to, had called me. I could afford to help them, but every fiber of my being screamed no. Brielle was right not to contact me. They lost the right to ask anything of me the day they betrayed me. I told my mother, I can't help them, and even if I could, I won't. She sounded devastated. You're being cruel. You need to think about your family. I clenched my jaw and reminded her, Brielle and Jasper didn't think about me when they had their affair, and none of you thought about me when you supported them. So why should I think about them now? I had worked hard to get where I am. I wasn't going to throw away $95,000 for two people who had done nothing but hurt me. My mother's voice cracked, and I could hear her crying. I never expected you to be so selfish. Brielle and Jasper will be in serious trouble if you don't help them. I felt nothing. That's unfortunate, but I can't help them. I hung up before I could hear another word. Since that call, my phone has been bombarded with text after text from my mother, almost every hour. She begged me to reconsider, to think about Brielle, to stop playing petty games. She kept telling me that this wasn't the time for revenge, that Brielle was in serious trouble, and warned that I'd regret this decision in the future. She sounded desperate. But I didn't know how to respond. I didn't want to be the villain here, but I also didn't want to be manipulated again. Am I wrong for not helping my sister after everything she did to me 3 years ago? Update: I finally blocked my family. I hadn't done it sooner because first, I wanted them to see what I was up to and feel jealous. And second, because I thought cutting them off completely might be something I'd regret if something bad happened to them. But now, I couldn't care less. I should have removed them from my life 3 years ago. Keeping them around this long was the real mistake. Refusing to help them now? It's not petty. It's just the logical decision. They've wasted so much money already, and I'm sure that even if I handed over $95,000 today, they wouldn't be able to pay it back. I don't have unlimited resources. Just because I'm doing well financially doesn't mean I can throw away that much money without expecting it to be repaid. If it were a close friend asking for help, I would still expect repayment, but these aren't close friends. They're not even my family anymore. I can't expect them to pay me back, so there's absolutely no reason for me to help, and that's as simple as it gets. I talked to a few of my friends about this to get their opinions, and they agreed that I did the right thing by refusing to give them the money, not out of revenge, but because it's completely impractical and foolish to expect me to help the very people who betrayed me in the past. Anyway, my mother is now blocked, and she can't contact me to guilt-trip me anymore. I have nothing to worry about. At least, that's what I thought. Update 2. Hi everyone, something really big happened today. I was at work when I got a call from my neighbor. She told me there was a couple outside my house screaming for me to come out and talk to them. My neighbor said they seemed pretty crazy and had been yelling at my door for about an hour, refusing to leave. I asked her to describe them, but deep down, I already knew who it was. When she described them, it just confirmed my suspicion. It was Brielle and Jasper. My neighbor insisted that I come back home to deal with them because she didn't think they were up to any good. Given that it was Brielle and Jasper, I knew she was right, so I thanked her and immediately started driving back home because I couldn't risk them getting into my house. Luckily, I got there in about 20 minutes and caught them in the act of trying to break into my house by picking a lock on my door. I pulled up in front of my house and demanded to know what they thought they were doing. I tried to call the police right away, but Jasper moved like lightning and knocked the phone out of my hand. Brielle walked over and said they were just there to talk and they didn't want anything from me, at least not right now. I told them to make it quick and made it clear that they shouldn't expect me to invite them inside. Whatever they had to say would have to be discussed outside, in the yard. They seemed okay with that, which was a relief because I didn't think it would be a good idea to let them inside. They already seemed pretty hostile, and I didn't know what to expect. Brielle started talking, telling me that our mother had informed her about the phone call and how I had ignored all the texts that followed, even blocking them. She said my behavior was unfair and that since it had been 3 years, I should really be over it by now. I was accused of being dramatic, of just trying to get attention from the family. Brielle said she felt insulted because I refused to help them, and that's why she was here to talk to me. She mentioned that she had managed to scrape together enough money for now by selling their house and all their jewelry, but there was a strong chance she might need more in the future. She wanted to know that she could rely on me when that time came. I didn't hesitate. "No," I said flatly. "You can't count on me, and you shouldn't ever count on me again, under any circumstances." My voice shook with anger. "I hate you and your husband with a passion, Brielle. You don't deserve my help. Not now. Not ever." I made sure she could hear the raw intensity in my words. I was so angry I warned her that it was taking all my self-control not to physically lash out at her, so it would be best if they just left. I could barely keep my hands from shaking. But then, out of nowhere, Jasper demanded that they wouldn't leave until I signed a document promising to help them with money in the future. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I knew that such a document wouldn't even be legally valid if I was coerced into signing it, and the audacity of them trying to manipulate me like that was beyond comprehension. I told them to get out of my house immediately, but Brielle wasn't done. She actually pushed me and said that I had to help them because I owed it to them because we were family. She said I couldn't just run away from my responsibilities like this. I was stunned. She had the nerve to put her hands on me. I wanted so badly to slap her, but I held back, knowing that violence would only make the situation worse. Instead, I grabbed my phone, which had fallen to the ground when Jasper knocked it out of my hand earlier. I ran for the door, dashed into my car, and sped off without even checking the rearview mirror. Luckily, I hadn't turned off the engine when I left the car, so it was still running. I got a head start on them, and thankfully, they didn't chase me on foot. But they stayed at my house, which was unfortunate. Once I was far enough away, I decided to call the police. I explained everything that had happened, and then I drove back to my house, arriving just in time before the police got there. Within 25 minutes, they showed up. I gave them all the details, and they arrested Brielle and Jasper. I knew the charges weren't serious, and they would probably get off easily, but at least they were taken away. I didn't have to deal with them anymore. A few hours passed, and I hadn't heard from anyone in my family, which was strange. I had expected at least one of them to contact me from a different number, but there was nothing. I couldn't decide if they were finally done with me or if they were just waiting for things to calm down before reaching out again. Update 3. It's been a week since I last posted, and I honestly thought my family would finally leave me alone after I called the police on Brielle and Jasper. But I was wrong. They didn't stop. This time, it was my parents who showed up at my house, asking if they could talk to me. They seemed different, a little less arrogant than Brielle and Jasper had been. So, I let them in. As soon as my mother stepped inside, she started crying. She apologized for ever taking Brielle's side over mine. My father explained that after they found out Brielle and Jasper were arrested, after seeing how they had treated me, they couldn't look at them the same way anymore. They had decided to cut them off. My mother kept crying, while my father continued to apologize for siding with Brielle all this time, admitting that it was me who was the victim. I listened, but I didn't feel relief. It was too little, too late. I had already built a life for myself without them, and I wasn't going to let them back in just because they finally realized they were wrong. I told them, "I appreciate the apology, but I've grown used to living my life on my own terms. I don't want to go back to putting family before myself. You were too late to fix things. I can't promise to work on our relationship because honestly, I don't see the point. It's broken." They protested, of course. They said that we could fix things if we really tried, but that was the problem. I didn't want to anymore. I just wanted peace. Peace away from the hurt and complications of the past. I told them I respected their efforts, but I was done trying. They seemed disappointed, but they left, asking if I could at least unblock them so they could stay in touch. I unblocked them. It felt strange, but for now, that's where things stand. I'm not sure what the future holds, but for the first time in my life, I'm focusing on my own peace. No more pretending, no more family obligations. Just me. What do you do when your own family betrays you so deeply, yet expects you to forgive and forget when they finally realize the truth? Serafina was betrayed in the most heart-wrenching way possible. Not only was her fiancé stolen by her own sister, but her entire family, including her parents, chose to side with them, leaving her to pick up the pieces of her broken heart. For years, she gave them everything: her support, her love, even her financial resources, believing that family was supposed to be there for one another. But when Brielle and Jasper's affair came to light, it wasn't just a matter of betrayal. It was the final confirmation that Serafina was nothing more than an afterthought to them. When her family reached out for help after Brielle and Jasper's business failed, they thought Serafina would forget everything and bail them out. But she didn't. She saw through their manipulation, and for the first time, she realized that family doesn't always mean unconditional love or support. Serafina had worked hard to build her own life, and despite what her family had done to her, she refused to throw away her hard-earned money to help those who had caused her the most pain. It wasn't about being petty. It was about protecting herself from further manipulation. So the question is, what would you have done? Would you have helped your family despite the pain they caused you? Or, like Serafina, would you have put your peace first? Let's talk about it in the comments, and if you found this story powerful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more.
The video message from my daughter-in-law, Lena, landed like a slap to the face. There she was on the screen, perfectly made up, her blonde hair cascading over designer clothing, a fake smile plastered on her lips. "Hi, Marlene, Theo," she began in that sickly sweet tone. "I'm reaching out about Aiden's 5th birthday bash next month. It's a major milestone, so we want to make it extra special." Here it comes, I thought, exchanging a wary glance with Theo. Ever since Elliot married this Instagram beauty queen, her demands on us had only grown. "A little birdie told me you two were looking to get Aiden something amazing for his big day." Lena batted her fake eyelashes. "Well, I'm making it easy. Aiden would absolutely love a brand new swimming pool installed in our backyard." My jaw dropped. A pool? Those ran tens of thousands of dollars, even for a basic model. Nothing too fancy. Lena continued with a dismissive hair toss. "Just your standard issue resort-style in-ground pool with a pool house, hot tub, the whole 9 yards. You know how much Aiden loves swimming." She droned on with more details of her extravagant vision, but I'd stopped listening. This was absurd. After years of her entitled behavior, this felt like the final straw. "So let me know if you need any other details. But really, make it worthwhile or don't even bother showing up." Lena flashed one last grin before the video cut out. The silence hung heavy between Theo and me. "She can't be serious," I finally sputtered. Theo sighed, squeezing the bridge of his nose. "When is she not?" You know how Lena gets. I did know. Ever since Elliot brought this artificially sweet high-maintenance woman into our lives, she'd made increasingly outrageous demands under the guise of making memories for our grandson Aiden. Expensive Disney cruises, designer clothes, even a celebrity kiddie party planner for his 4th birthday bash. And Lena always spun it as being for Aiden, but anyone could see the real priority was herself and her influencer image. But this took things to another level. A fully decked-out pool just for a kid's birthday? It was obscene. "We can't," I said flatly. "Theo, we don't have that kind of money. Even if we scraped everything we had, there's no way." Tears pricked my eyes, a mix of anger, hurt, and exasperation churning inside me. This was our family she was talking about, not one of her online audiences to impress. I could see the same emotions etched on Theo's face as he pulled me into a hug. For a long moment, we clung to each other, united against Lena's audacious demand. But Theo eventually pulled back, resignation in his eyes. Maybe we could look into something smaller," he said tentatively. "We both have been putting in extra hours at work, and there's my pension fund that'll be available soon." I stared at him, stunned he'd even entertained such lunacy. "You're not seriously considering this?" He shrugged helplessly. "It's for our grandson, Marlene. If doing this might help get Lena off our backs, keep Elliot and Aiden in our lives." His words trailed off, but I could hear the unspoken meaning loud and clear. If giving Lena what she demanded was the price for preserving our family, for keeping Elliot and Aiden from being completely poisoned by her distorted values. Reopening the wound she just inflicted, Lena's parting words echoed in my mind. "Make it worthwhile, or don't bother showing up." My heart ached at the thought of being cut off from my only grandchild over this, but I also couldn't fathom bankrupting ourselves for one of Lena's tantrums. Squaring my shoulders, I met Theo's worried gaze. No matter what it took, I wouldn't let this woman fracture our family. We had to find a way to make this right. The days blurred together after that bombshell from Lena. Every conversation, every interaction seemed to circle back to her outrageous pool demand. We could put a home equity loan on the house, Theo mused one night over dinner, just to cover the upfront costs. I nearly choked on my food. Are you insane? Go into debt over this? We're not made of money. He wilted under my glare. I'm just trying to think of options, honey. You know how Lena gets when she doesn't get her way. I slammed my fork down with more force than intended. So what? We just roll over for her every tantrum? Where does it end? The haunted look in Theo's eyes said it all. We both knew there was no endpoint with Lena, not unless one of us put our foot down. Still, the threat of being cut off from Elliot and Aiden loomed over us like a curse. In a way, that's exactly what Lena had become, a curse upon our family. The demands only escalated from there. Suddenly she was calling constantly, texting incessant updates about party planning she needed our input on. Her reasoning didn't even make sense half the time. She just wanted to soak up our energy and resources. One afternoon, I arrived home from the library to find Theo elbow-deep in sketches and spreadsheets. "What's all this?" I asked in bewilderment. Lena stopped by with one of her vision boards, he sighed, looking 20 years older. She had it all mapped out, the pool, the landscaping, even a pool house with its own kitchen and bar. You're kidding. I sank onto the couch, anger roiling in my gut. She brought this insanity into our home? She said this is the only way Aiden will be happy. Theo raked a hand through his thinning hair warily. That we're depriving him if we don't make his dream come true. My jaw clenched hard enough to crack teeth. That's a bunch of crap. This is about her, not Aiden. I know. Theo turned back to the coffee table of binders and portfolios, misery etched in the slump of his shoulders. But maybe if we put in some reasonable requests, she'll settle for less. Or maybe she'll keep demanding more. I threw up my hands in frustration. Since when did we start going broke for that woman's ego? The shrill ring of Theo's phone cut off his reply. Lena's smiling face flashing on the screen. He shot me an apologetic look and answered, jaw tensing as she launched into another tirade. I watched him nod along like a beaten dog, offering feeble uh-huhs and we'll sees in response to her endless stream of wants. When he finally hung up 20 minutes later, I could no longer hold back my fury. I'm drawing the line, Theo. This is utter madness. Sagging back against the sofa, he looked utterly defeated. She threatened not to let us see Aiden if we don't give in, Marlene. What are we supposed to do? My heart twisted at the mere thought of losing our grandson, of Aiden being shaped and twisted by that woman's distorted values, without our stabilizing presence to guide him. It was a waking nightmare. But I also knew we couldn't keep indulging Lena's deranged spending and entitlement complex. It was a vicious, self-perpetuating cycle. Someone had to put their foot down, even if it meant confronting the worst possible outcome. Meeting Theo's haunted gaze, I drew a steadying breath. We need a plan. One that finally puts this madness to bed, without losing our family over it. His eyes widened briefly, then narrowed to cold steel. At last, we were on the same page. No more being manipulated, no more cowering to Lena's histrionics. For the sake of our grandchild, the kid glove treatment was officially over. Aiden's 5th birthday party was every bit the overblown spectacle Lena had threatened. Dozens of shrieking kids swarmed the backyard she'd decked out like a carnival midway. Balloon arches, a massive bounce house, even a live petting zoo dominated our modest suburban yard. Can you believe this madness? I muttered to Theo as we wove through the chaos, searching for our grandson. He grimaced, eyes bouncing from the whirring rides to the team of princessed-up party performers putting on a show. Try not to let it get to you today. We're here for Aiden, remember? Easy for him to say. My teeth ground with each new display of excess I took in. An entire hide worth of party food piled onto tables, an electric train ride blaring its caller through the neighborhood. All for one little boy's birthday. But Lena was the true ringmaster of this 3-ring circus. She flitted through the crowd in a designer sundress that cost more than my monthly mortgage, greeting guests with air kisses and fake laughs. Her social media friend posed beside her for countless staged photo ops, When she finally deigned to notice us, her sugary smile didn't reach her eyes. "Well, if it isn't the party poopers, so glad you two could join." I opened my mouth, every biting remark I'd rehearsed rising to my tongue, but Theo squeezed my hand in warning. "We're happy to be here for Aiden's big day," he replied tightly. Yes, about that." Lena's eyes flicked across the yard, sweeping dismissively over the chaos surrounding us. "I must admit, I'm a little disappointed. I thought you two loved your grandson enough to go all out." I bristled at her condescending tone, taking in the insanity all around us. "You're kidding me, right? This spectacle is enough for 10 birthdays. Oh, honey, don't be so bourgeois." She patted my cheek in a way that made me want to slap it. "You know that's just how us influencers do things. Go big or go home, right?" The fake, tinkling laugh that followed made my blood boil. Bourgeois? She was the one blowing enough cash for a down payment on a house on this ridiculous circus. "Where's the gift, anyway?" She tapped one designer heel impatiently. "I gave you too ample time to make this a memorable bash for Aiden." "The gift?" Theo sputtered, shifting uncomfortably. "We didn't get the chance to really—" Don't tell me you punted on that, too." Lena's face contorted into a sneer, drawing looks from nearby guests. "See, this is exactly why I keep my expectations low for you two. So painfully pedestrian." That was the final straw. I jabbed a finger at the spectacle surrounding us, fury making me tremble. "Are you out of your mind? Look at all this. How could you possibly need or want anything more?" Ooh, someone's getting a little big for her britches. Lena ran her eyes over me with barely disguised contempt. I expected better than this pathetic display from my husband's parents. Truly disappointing. As her social circle began murmuring and leaning in, I saw red. "The only disappointment here is you, using Aiden as an excuse to bankrupt us over this gaudy—" "Mommy?" The small, timid voice caused the breath to catch in my throat. I turned to find Aiden himself standing there, party hat askew and confusion written on his cherubic features. "What's going on?" His wide eyes bounced between Lena and me. For a long, tense beat, the entire party seemed to hold its collective breath, waiting for Lena's response. Then her features melted into an exaggerated pout, and she rushed to pull Aiden against her hip. "Oh, sweetie, your mean old grandma is just upset she couldn't get you that new pool you wanted." "Pool?" The poor kid looked even more bewildered. "Yes, for your birthday." Tears welled in Lena's eyes as she stroked his hair. "But she and Grandpa are just being selfish old grumps about giving you your present." Aiden's gaze bounced between Lena and us, innocent incomprehension melting into dismay. The sight twisted my heart into knots. Lena, as always, had spun a web of lies to paint herself as the hapless victim. "But I didn't want a pool," Aiden mumbled meekly. A hush fell over the entire yard as every eye turned toward Lena, awaiting her response. Her jaw tightened for a fraction of a second before she threw an arm around Aiden, sobbing dramatically. "Of course you didn't, sweetie." She locked eyes with me over his head, that vindictive smile back in place. "How could you want something so frivolous when you have such a thoughtful mom who's about to give you a baby sibling?" My heart plummeted somewhere into my shoes. As a new flood of cries and gasps filled the yard, surrounding us in a swell of shock, Lena just stared at me in cold triumph. In that moment, I knew nothing would ever be the same. The fallout from Aiden's disastrous birthday bash was swift and absolute. In the days and weeks after Lena's conniving pregnancy reveal, a palpable rift formed in our family. Elliot, ever the doting husband, rallied behind his devious wife without question. "She's under a lot of stress and hormones right now," he protested whenever Theo or I tried reasoning with him. "We need to be supportive." Supportive? After the humiliating spectacle she made of us in front of all those people, over her ludicrous lies about wanting a pool for Aiden, the mere thought made my blood boil. But Elliot simply waved off our concerns, too besotted to see Lena's true colors. Instead, the two of them retreated further into their social media bubble, posting a deluge of videos and photo ops about her radiant pregnancy journey. Meanwhile, our access to our actual grandson continued dwindling at Lena's behest. Every attempt at a visit or outing was rebuffed with another flimsy excuse about her difficult pregnancy and need for rest. I tried pushing back, calling Elliot out on our unfair treatment, but he only grew more defensive. "Why can't you be happy for us?" he snapped during one tense exchange after I insisted on having Aiden over for Theo's birthday. I threw up my hands in disgust. Of course we're happy you're having another child, but this goes far beyond that, and you know it. Elliot's jaw tightened mulishly. No, I don't know that. All I see are my parents acting jealous and bitter about our growing family. The hurtful accusation struck deep, rendering me momentarily speechless. How could my own son be so blind to the manipulation swirling around him? I stalked off before I said something I'd regret, fighting back angry tears. In the den, I found Theo watching the latest Lena video with a pained expression. "Did you see this garbage?" I scoffed, gesturing at the screen where Lena cooed about her pregnancy glow and upcoming nursery design. "She's airing all our dirty laundry for clicks." Theo shook his head slowly. "Not just that. Check out the comments." A quick skim revealed a distressing number of replies bashing us, calling us cruel and unsupportive, all based on the twisted story Lena was peddling about her humble family. Clicking off the video in disgust, I sank into the sofa beside Theo. I don't know how much more of this I can take. He draped a comforting arm around my shoulders, the wariness in his eyes mirroring my own. We knew there'd be backlash for standing up to Lena. She's not going to let this slide. So we're just supposed to sit back while she smears us in public? Cuts us off from our own grandchild over her petty schemes? Tears of frustration stung my eyes. Of course not, but we need to be smart about our next move. As if on cue, Theo's phone chimed with a new text notification. Something in his expression shifted as he read the message. "What is it?" I asked warily. He held the phone out, letting me read the message from an unknown number. "Evidence against Lena. Seeing you suffer kills me, but I can help. Attached are files on her real spending priorities. No need to thank me. I'll remain anonymous. Do what you must." My breath caught as I scrolled through the suspicious attachments. Bank statements detailing massive sums of money, photographs appearing to show Lena out partying and gallivanting while Aiden was off-screen. Could this be legitimate? "Who's this from?" I asked in a hushed voice, dread and a sliver of hope warring within me. Theo shook his head, lips set in a grim line. "No idea. But whoever they are, they just handed us the key to bringing Lena down once and for all." My heart stuttered at the thought, at finally being able to strike back at her manipulative lies and power plays, to save Aiden from her toxic influence. But to do so could risk severing our family ties for good. Elliot would surely take Lena's side, blinded by her false narratives. Theo must have seen the turmoil playing out on my face, because he squeezed my hand fiercely, leaning until our eyes met. "This may be our only chance, Marlene. Our best shot at getting Aiden away from her poisonous influence, by any means necessary." The words hung heavy in the air, their implication clear. This was it, our point of no return that would alter the course of our family forever. No matter how it played out in the aftermath, we couldn't back down from this make-or-break moment. Not if it meant protecting Aiden's future. With a shuddering exhale, I nodded to Theo. Time to stop walking on eggshells around Lena once and for all. Time to fight back. After the damning evidence from our anonymous source, Theo and I wasted no time springing into action against Lena. We began compiling every scrap of proof we could find, racking our brains for past incidents and manipulations she'd pulled over the years. With my background as a librarian, I focused on conducting meticulous online research, while Theo tapped his network of colleagues and parents at the high school for any whispers about Lena's unscrupulous behavior. No stone was left unturned in our quest to expose her web of lies. "Did you know the Hensons cut ties with Lena after their son's birthday party last year?" Theo told me one evening over coffee, eyes bright with vindication. I raised my eyebrows. "No, I didn't. What happened?" "Apparently she hosted this overblown princess bash for their daughter, then badmouthed them on social media for being cheap with their gift." Theo shook his head in disgust. "Jane said Lena has an entire hate folder on her phone, with screenshots of messages going back months." My blood boiled at the thought of more innocent families being dragged through the mud by that wretched snake. "I want copies of everything. We're blowing this whole farce wide open." Theo nodded grimly, determination etched into every line of his weathered face. For too long, we'd suffered in silence, taking Lena's abuse in misguided hopes of protecting our family. But now, Armed with the truth and a growing arsenal of evidence, we were going to make her pay for her manipulation, one way or another. And I refused to let Aiden remain trapped in her toxic orbit any longer. The plan took shape over hushed discussions at our kitchen table, fueled by righteous indignation and the occasional glass of wine to steady our nerves. After raising our finances on tight budgets for so long, even the idea of striking back at Lena carried immense risk. But seeing the despicable way she'd used and discarded other families for her own gratification, her callous treatment of Aiden, it all hardened our resolve. This was about more than just settling a personal vendetta. What if we started an anonymous website? I proposed one night, tapping my pencil restlessly against my notepad. A landing spot to release all the evidence to the public without directly confronting her. Theo frowned, rubbing his chin. Isn't that a bit passive, though? You know Lena, she'll just spin it as more hater attacks and bury the truth with her own propaganda blitz. Maybe? I worried my lip, then my eyes drifted to the teetering pile of manila folders brimming with damning documents. Or maybe we go straight to the source. He lifted one bushy eyebrow. You want to slip this all to Elliot? I shrugged, nerves fluttering in my belly. It's a risk, sure, but at this point, a direct intervention might be our only hope of finally breaking through to him and the truth. The thought of turning our own son against his wife, no matter how vile she'd proven to be, made my stomach churn. But I couldn't shake the memory of his haunted, oblivious expression at Aiden's party as Lena spun her web, too blinded by her manipulation to see the toxic reality. Releasing all our gathered evidence in one fell swoop, overwhelming him with proof of her true nature. It could be the wake-up call Elliot so desperately needed to escape her grasp. Theo sighed heavily, reaching across to squeeze my hand. It's a bold move, and if Elliot warns Lena first, then all bets are off, I finished quietly. We both knew that in Lena's hands the documents spelling out her misdeeds could vanish like smoke, smothered by her relentless spin and lies. Not to mention any fallout or vindictive vengeance she'd gleefully unleash on us all. But what other choice did we have? Sitting idly by had allowed her toxic web to spread unchecked this far. If we wanted any hope of saving Aiden from that poisonous environment, of protecting the rest of our family from her malice, we had to take one final, daring swing at the heart of her vile empire. Meeting Theo's steadfast gaze across the table, I saw the same conviction burning behind his eyes. No matter the risk, we couldn't let this insanity drag on any longer. Not while an innocent child's future hung in the balance. After all, that's what family was for, shielding our loved ones from those who wished to do them harm. And God help anyone who threatened a single hair on Aiden's head. With a grim nod, I reached for another file, and the planning began anew. One way or another, we'd bring Lena's house of lies crashing down around her, even if it meant raising our own family to the studs in the process. It was time. After weeks of meticulous planning and gathering evidence, Theo and I were ready to execute our gambit against Lena. The night before, we'd uploaded a comprehensive file dump to an anonymous web server, a digital dossier containing every scrap of proof we'd uncovered about Lena's neglect, manipulation, and wasteful spending. Incriminating bank statements, logged social media activity, even testimonies from others she'd mistreated over the years. All of it packaged together in one tidy bundle, waiting for our final keystrokes to release it upon the world. We planned to send the upload link directly to Elliot first, hoping the shock of the revelations would finally break whatever spell Lena had him under. But we also arranged for the files to automatically broadcast across multiple social platforms an hour later, ensuring widespread dispersal no matter how Lena tried to bury it. As the appointed hour ticked closer, my stomach twisted with nervous dread. This was it, our chance to protect Aiden and blow Lena's sham life apart for good. But the implications for the rest of our family... You ready for this? Theo's gruff voice pulled me from my whirling thoughts. He reached across the table to grasp my clammy hand, his own slightly trembling. We both knew there was no going back after this. I could only manage a tight nod, drawing a steadying breath. As I'll ever be. Theo's eyes crinkled at the corners with grim resignation. Then he turned toward the laptop between us. My heart kicked into overdrive as his finger hovered over the trackpad. For Aiden, he murmured. Our personal code for stealing our nerves these past few weeks. Another nod from me. For Aiden. And with that, he struck the upload key. Lena's exposure officially began. The file pinged to Elliot's inbox first, accompanied by a brief message. Open me, and you'll finally see the truth about your wife. I felt sick watching the progress bar crawl as the massive data dump transferred over. Every second dragged out like a Russian novel, each percentage increase seeming to taunt us with the damage we were about to unleash. How would Elliot react to this bombshell revelation about the woman he'd married? Would he immediately dismiss it as our bitter meddling? Or would the sheer enormity of evidence finally pierce whatever veil Lena had draped over his eyes? Most importantly, how vicious would Lena's retaliation be once she caught wind of our actions? A part of me was tempted to call the whole thing off, to snatch back this Pandora's box before its contents could contaminate our lives forever. But another insistent part, the one blazing with righteous fury over Lena's cruelty to Aiden, knew we'd finally crossed the Rubicon. There could be no half measures or surrender now, only scorched earth in the wake of our campaign. Suddenly, an alert box startled me from my daze. Transfer complete. The uploaded documents began ricocheting around the internet a second later, a widening digital diaspora every bit as uncontrollable as a raging bushfire. Within that first minute, a video compilation of Lena's greatest con hits began autoplaying on her own Instagram page, overlaying her palatial home videos with audio snippets of her vicious comments about Aiden and our family. Her comment sections, Twitter feeds, every social platform began melting down with a similar deluge of shocking evidence. Bank statements laid bare, archived posts and videos of her neglecting Aiden while living it up, personal messages mapping the intricate deceptions she'd spun. The bombardment was overwhelming. A digital tsunami crashing hard against the carefully curated facade she'd constructed over the years. And that was just the opening salvo in our counterstrike. Beside me, Theo let out a shuddering breath, half tension blowing off, half dawning realization of what we'd just set into motion. We watched the rapidly proliferating files ricochet across the web and across our community like a firestorm, the enormity of our actions finally striking home. Within the hour, news stations would pick up the story. Then the national outlets and celebrity bloggers. And at the center would be our ground zero blast, a stark glimpse into the trauma and manipulation Lena had inflicted upon our family over these past years. It was finally too late to stop the shockwave. Our truth offensive had come for the house of Lena, and nothing would be left unscathed in its wake, not even our own family. The fallout from our cyber bombardment against Lena hit like a hurricane. Within hours, her immaculate online kingdom had been reduced to a smoking crater of shattered illusions and exposed lies. Social media ran rampant with screenshots, videos, and a gleeful dissection of every incriminating scrap of evidence we'd uncovered. Overnight, Lena went from influencer icon to radioactive pariah as her brands and sponsors began jumping ship in droves. As for me and Theo, we could only watch in a strange detachment as the firestorm raged, alternating between grim satisfaction and creeping dread over what this metamorphosis would mean for our family. We hadn't heard a peep from Elliot since uploading the files, leaving us to theorize in anxious silence over how deeply the revelations about his wife had shaken him. Would he emerge from the wreckage still defiantly loyal to Lena's lies? Or had our brutal truth offensive finally broken her spell over him? The answer came just after dawn, in a flurry of tense knocks at the door. Thank God. Theo exhaled in a ragged whisper when we saw Elliot's haggard face through the peephole. He ushered him inside, shooting me a worried glance. "Son, what's going on? We've been sick with—" The words died on his lips as Elliot staggered forward, eyes hollow and brimming with barely contained rage. I flinched, half expecting him to lash out at the source of this cataclysm. But then, with an anguished cry, he simply crumpled against Theo, shaking with suppressed sobs. Exchanging a wordless look with Theo, I moved to steady Elliot as he began to keen in harsh, gulping gasps, like a dam finally shattering deep within. "I'm sorry," he choked between ragged breaths. "God, I'm so sorry." My throat thickened at the sheer brokenness lacing his voice. After so many months of self-inflicted isolation at Lena's whim, seeing my own son return to us in such a state felt like a shard of ice piercing my heart. Eventually, his sobs tapered enough for speech. "You were right about her. All this time you were right. Every vile thing she did to you, to Aiden." Another wave of anguish racked him, and he squeezed his eyes shut, burying his face in Theo's shoulder like a lost child. I exchanged a haunted look with my husband, words unspoken between us. We'd shattered her deceptions, yes, but at what cost to our son? Those messages, the videos. I can't believe I let it go on for so long. How I could be so blind. Hey, it's okay," Theo murmured gruffly, hands rubbing soothing circles on Elliot's back. "That's what she did, son. Manipulated you into her web, we get it." The harrowed look in his eyes said otherwise, that some part of us would never forgive ourselves for failing to extract Elliot sooner. But for now, simply cradling our child against the aftermath seemed more important. When his ragged breathing finally evened out, Elliot pulled back, eyes rimmed and face haggard. "I kicked her out last night, took Aiden and left after seeing everything." He gestured vaguely, then seemed to deflate all over again. "God, how could I let Hervis get so twisted? To put Aiden through all that?" I bit back a scathing remark about putting a stop to her antics sooner. My anger could keep for another day. Right now, my son needed comfort and a safe harbor to process this traumatic reckoning. So I simply held his gaze and nodded, hoping he could read the understanding there, and the promise that her reign of terror was over. Elliot's shoulders slumped, weariness crashing over him as the last vestiges of life before crumbled away. Leaning into Theo again, he squeezed his eyes shut. "I don't know what I'd do without you both. After everything she put us through." The raw gratitude in his gravelly murmur was like a balm against all the suffering we'd endured this past year. Not that the road ahead would be easy. Lena would surely retaliate against this devastation in whatever ways she could. But in that moment, with our family united against her at long last, I felt a surge of defiance toward whatever vindictive storm still loomed ahead. She'd struck the first blows, set the rules of this scorched earth campaign. Now it was her turn to reap the whirlwind we'd sown. My eyes met Theo's over Elliot's bowed head. A silent vow passed between us, to ensure Lena never regained a foothold in our lives again. Not after this razing to the bedrock. Aiden's future and our family's well-being would remain secure, no matter how much we had to sacrifice to keep the she-wolf away. In the aftermath of our brutal takedown, the shockwaves rippled through every facet of our lives. But for the first time in what felt like an eternity, there was a sense of hope threaded through the upheaval. With Lena banished from our household, Elliot and Aiden took up semi-permanent residence in our spare bedroom as they worked to rebuild their lives from the wreckage she'd left behind. Watching my grandson set Fi into a routine free from her toxic influence was like a soothing balm after so much turmoil. Of course, Lena didn't slink off into oblivion quietly. Her initial defiance at the revelations morphed into a spiraling crusade of denials, threats, and attempts to regain control of the narrative. "She's claiming we fabricated everything," Elliot told us one night at the dinner table, jaw clenched in barely contained fury. "There's a new video saying we conspired against our own family out of jealousy." Theo grunted in disgust while I fought the urge to hurl my plate across the room. Even disgraced and dejected, that vile woman couldn't help lashing out like a cornered viper. "Let her squirm," I spat, locking eyes with my son. "The truth is finally out there, loud and clear for anyone who matters to see." "You're right." Some of the tension drained from Elliot's shoulders with an exhausted slump. In that moment, he seemed to age years in a matter of seconds. "Hell, it's all I can do not to put even more of her dirty laundry on blast right now." Despite the anger still simmering under his words, just having him back under our roof was like a weight lifted. Being able to see Aiden grow and play outside Lena's malign influence made every hardship worthwhile. Sure, she continued sniping and lobbing hateful allegations from her dwindling circle of sycophants. But without her manicured illusions to prop it up, the bluster rang increasingly hollow. While our family unit steadily regained its bearings and sense of purpose, the recharged bonds between Theo, me, and our boys were a constant through the transition. But nowhere was that bond more evident than in our renewed focus on Aiden's well-being. Having him around constantly, free from Lena's manipulation, revealed just how much she'd warped the sweet, innocent boy in her quest for notoriety. "Grandma, why didn't you like my party last time?" he asked me one sunny afternoon while blowing bubbles on the back patio. My gut twisted at the remembered humiliation, but when I glanced over at Aiden's cherubic features, so full of pure childhood curiosity, the truth came easily. "You know something, sweetheart? That whole big party, it wasn't really for you at all." I tickled his belly, earning a peal of giggles. "Your mommy just wanted to show off for her friends, not make you feel special." Aiden's tiny brow furrowed in confusion. "But I thought we were posed to have fun?" Leave it to the heartbreakingly earnest perspective of a child to cut straight through to the core truth. Smiling, I pulled him onto my lap and nuzzled his soft hair. "Of course we are, my little guy, and this time, I promise it's just going to be about us having fun together. No big fuss or showing off, okay?" My throat thickened as I drank in his radiant smile. "Because you're all the fun this old grandma needs." When his arms tightened around me in a fierce hug, I shot a look toward the patio door. Elliot and Theo were watching the tender scene, fondness and relief written across their faces. In that moment, with my family whole again and Lena's toxic presence banished, I felt as light and carefree as the bubbles drifting on the breeze, like awakening from a long, twisted nightmare finally behind us. Our war against Lena's malice had been brutal, with casualties strewn across both sides. But as I held my grandson close, savoring his unbridled joy, the battleground seemed a small price to pay. When Aiden's next milestone birthday arrived a few months later, we threw a small but rowdy bash in the backyard, a jumble of balloons, cheap pizza, and delighted shrieks as he tore through stack after stack of gifts showered on him by his adoring clan. No obscene overindulgences or camera crews, no vapid social media performances. Just the unconditional warmth and love of an extended family reveling in our reconnection. As I watched Theo gamely endure another round of the mechanized dancing robot Aiden had cajoled him into, my heart swelled with a sense of gratitude. For persevering through the darkest days and emerging victorious. For regaining the family I'd feared was lost forever to Lena's poisoned webs. Most of all, for ensuring my sweet grandson's bright future would remain unshackled by that vile woman's lust for attention at any cost. When Aiden came barreling over to demand another turn on the robot, Theo shot me a wink and an exaggerated grimace over the boy's head. A silent acknowledgement of how far we'd come to reclaim these simple family moments. Pulling them both close, I couldn't hide my radiant smile as the sounds of laughter and revelry swirled around us. Our family's new beginning had finally arrived. "You should have handed over control when Dad passed," Brielle's voice cut through the noise like a knife through butter. "This is our chance to sell and make a real profit." My heart stuttered as I peered around the corner, spotting my cousin deep in conversation with Ethan, my fiancé of 3 years. They huddled near the bar, oblivious to my eavesdropping presence at our winery's annual harvest party. "I'm in," Ethan murmured with a solemn nod. "We'll tell Avery after securing the deal. She won't be able to refuse once the money's on the table." Bile rose in my throat as the truth slammed into me. My own family, my supposed loved ones, plotting to steal away my father's life's work, everything I'd sacrificed to preserve. Trembling, I stormed away, desperate for space to process the gut-wrenching betrayal. Tears blurred my vision as I fled through the vineyard's rows, the muffled sounds of celebration fading behind me. How could they? After all the blood, sweat, and tears I'd poured into this place, into keeping Dad's dream alive. And Ethan? The man I'd planned to marry, willing to strip me of my legacy for profit. The vines stretched endlessly in every direction, mirroring the tangled maze of shock and rage clawing at my chest. I stumbled forward, uncaring of the twigs snagging my dress or the chill night air whipping across my face. It wasn't until I reached the secluded corner where Dad's favorite rosebush grew that I finally crumpled to the ground in anguished sobs. The petals glistened with dew, oblivious to my shattering world. After several ragged breaths, determination replaced despair. I wouldn't go down without a fight. Not while a single drop of my father's spirit flowed through these vines. If Ethan and Brielle wanted a war for the winery's soul, they'd soon discover I possessed more metal than they could ever fathom. Fueled by righteous fury, I rose and marched with renewed purpose back toward the celebration. Ethan and Brielle would never see the tempest brewing behind my controlled smile as I rejoined the crowd. Let them bask in their misguided confidence. It would make their downfall all the more catastrophic. I was the master of this vineyard, and by night's end, I'd have the perfect scheme to protect Dad's legacy at all costs. In the days following the harvest party, I played the role of the oblivious fiancé to perfection. Ethan remained affectionate, his gentle kisses and soft caresses mere rehearsed performances masking his deceit. "How was your meeting with the marketing team?" he asked over dinner one evening, his hazel eyes betraying not a glimmer of guilt. I forced a smile. "Productive. We've got some exciting new campaigns in the works." Ethan nodded, shoveling a forkful of pasta into his mouth. "That's great, babe. I know how hard you've been working to take the winery to new heights." The blatant hypocrisy nearly made me gag. While he spouted meaningless platitudes, I secretly gathered evidence, piecing together the full extent of his treachery with Brielle. Tapping into the winery's financial records and encrypted communications, I discovered their embezzlement stretched back months, funds they'd been funneling into an offshore account. Printouts detailing dozens of wire transfers lay scattered across my office desk like damning puzzle pieces. My blood boiled as I connected their illicit money trail to meetings with corporate bigwigs, vultures eager to devour my family's legacy. "You lying, grasping snakes," I seethed through gritted teeth. The office door creaked open, and Lucia, my most trusted employee, stepped in with a concerned frown. "Everything okay, Miss Connors?" I waved her inside and gestured to the documents. "See for yourself. My dear fiancé and cousin have been stabbing us in the back for months, setting up a sale to that blood-sucking conglomerate we've been fighting off." Lucia's eyes widened in horror as she scanned the records. "Those maneuvers, how could they?" "Greed and self-preservation," I spat. "Ethan's likely counting on making me the rank-and-file winery bitch once the deal is done." I slammed my fist on the desk, delighting in Lucia's startled flinch. "But they're gravely mistaken if they think I'll roll over without bringing the entire facade crumbling down on their heads." Lucia swallowed hard, her voice wavering. "What are you going to do?" A wicked grin stretched across my face as the seeds of vengeance took root. "I'm going to remind them why you don't dispense with honor among thieves." The next morning, I strode into Marcia Blackwood's prestigious law office, evidence folder in hand. If anyone could help dismantle Ethan and Brielle's underhanded scheme, it was Marcia, a brilliant legal shark with a reputation for devouring corporate sleazeballs. "Miss Connors," her assistant ushered me inside. "Miss Blackwood is expecting you." I found the renowned attorney studying a stack of documents behind her imposing mahogany desk. Razor-sharp eyes scrutinized me over the rim of her glasses as I approached. "You certainly have a flair for dramatic entrances," Marcia said dryly. "I hope, for your sake, you've brought me something substantial." Wordlessly, I handed over the folder and waited as she flipped through the incriminating paperwork. Bank statements, encrypted emails, everything I'd compiled on the betrayal. Marcia's practiced mask of stoicism slipped, her eyebrows arching in disbelief. "This is unbelievable. Your own family conspiring against you in broad daylight." I stifled the urge to snap. Try having that realization slap you across the face. Instead, I simply nodded. "Can you help me take them down?" My voice remained steady, devoid of the raging storm churning beneath my composed exterior. "I want to bury Ethan and Brielle under the full weight of legal and public retribution." A predatory glint flickered in Marcia's eyes, the look of a tiger scenting blood on the wind. "Oh, I'll do more than that, Miss Connors. By the time we're through, their reputations and freedom will be torn asunder. They'll be left destitute, forced to slink away from this valley with their tails between their legs." My lips curved into a vindictive smile, already envisioning the devastation I'd rain down upon the traitorous snakes slithering in my midst. Over the ensuing days, Marcia and I constructed an impenetrable counteroffensive, rallying allies in preparation to obliterate Ethan and Brielle's scheme. Anthony, my winery's head vintner, eagerly supplied information to undermine their corporate dealings. Jackson, our top sales rep, helped divert funds and reroute profitable distribution contracts. Kara in marketing launched a campaign showcasing our heritage and community ties, the very soul they aimed to ravage for profit. With each Ailey recruited and asset secured, the day of reckoning crept inexorably closer. Ethan and Brielle carried on clueless, their arrogance blinding them to the crumbling ground beneath their feet. I could hardly wait to cement the trapdoor's collapse and revel in their pathetic, well-deserved downfall. The first strike hit with precise, surgical brutality. This just in. Financial records have surfaced exposing embezzlement and corporate fraud at Connor Family Vineyards, the local news anchor announced in a grave tone. Sources indicate Chief Marketing Officer Ethan Baxter and Deputy Manager Brielle Evans have been funneling company assets into overseas accounts for personal gain. I watched with wicked satisfaction as the damning report flashed on the TV, my finger hovering over the pause button. Frozen on screen, Ethan and Brielle's faces contorted in horror. A perfect captured memory. In the ensuing days, a merciless barrage of legal filings and media leaks descended upon the conspirators. Marcia worked tirelessly, slapping them with criminal charges while ensuring every salacious allegation dominated headlines. Ethan confronted me in a heated parking lot showdown, his usually polished veneer cracked and disheveled. "Why are you doing this?" he demanded through clenched teeth, eyes wild and desperate. "We were going to set you up with a nice payoff, more than enough to retire comfortably." I laughed in his face, loud and mocking. "And let you thieves bleed my father's legacy dry? Spend his life's work on foosball tables and degenerate thrill-seeking?" The venom in my tone seemed to shrink him before my very eyes. "You deluded yourself into thinking I'd just hand over the keys and walk away once the money hit my account, that I'd forsake my responsibilities, my duties as Connor heir." Poking his chest with each enunciated word, I leaned until our faces were mere inches apart. "You miscalculated. Badly." Ethan recoiled, his expression incredulous. "So that's it? You'd rather watch everything burn than compromise?" Meeting his gaze with frigid certainty, I replied, "Some legacies are worth martyring over." With that, I spun on my heel and strutted away, leaving him to stew in his shattered delusions. The next phase hit hard and fast, a series of surgical strikes systematically sabotaging Ethan and Brielle's corporate dealings. One by one, their underhanded business negotiations unraveled in spectacular fashion. Within days, the Vineyard conglomerate abruptly pulled their buyout offer after our PR blitzkrieg portrayed us as a historic community anchor, the embodiment of Napa's proud heritage they'd never uproot without a customer backlash. All its posturing about market share and consolidation swiftly crumbled in the face of such toxic optics. Other potential investors fled like scattering roaches in the light, terrified of being labeled corporate pillagers. With their options dwindling, Ethan and Brielle found themselves outmaneuvered at every turn, each frantic move, born of arrogance and desperation, easily anticipated and deflected. Soon they'd have nowhere left to squirm except directly into the pit of consequences I'd meticulously excavated. I could already envision them dangling on the precipice, one fateful shove from total disgrace and ruin. With Ethan and Brielle's scheme to sell the winery lying in ruins, it was time to set the final stage for my grand defiance. I'd lured the snakes into a corner, now to spring the trap and crush them beneath my heel once and for all. The annual Winemakers Charity Gala presented the perfect opportunity. A high-profile event with investors, media, and industry bigwigs from across the valley in attendance. Precisely the backdrop I needed to thoroughly humiliate the treacherous fools threatening my legacy. "You wanted to speak with me?" Ethan sidled up beside me, his expression a pathetic mask of defeat and confusion. Behind him, Brielle hovered nearby, shoulders slumped in dejected resignation. I regarded them both with callous appraisal. "Yes, there's an important matter we need to discuss at the gala tonight, a major announcement regarding the winery's future." Ethan's brow furrowed as he processed my words. "You mean?" "Exactly." I allowed a calculated pause, lips curving into a razor-thin smile. "I think it's time I abdicated control and allowed the next generation to steer Connor Vineyards forward, with all our supporters present to bear witness." His features slackened in apparent relief, and I had to stifle a derisive snort. If only he knew the profound depths of his delusion. I don't know what to say, he stammered out. Thank you for finally seeing reason, Avery. I promise Brielle and I will make you proud with the new direction. Save your platitudes. I cut him off with a dismissive wave. Just be prepared to embrace your role on the stage tonight. It'll be a performance neither of you will ever forget. As the gala commenced a few hours later, tensions simmered just beneath the celebratory surface. Ethan and Brielle worked the crowds with artificial cheer, confidence buoyed by hubris and ignorance. They fully expected this evening to mark their ascension as winery overloads, a private victory party attended by the entire valley's elite. Little did the self-deluded fools realize the event heralded lost-doomed downfall, orchestrated by the very woman they sought to disenfranchise. Their humiliation would be gloriously public, a final legacy-staining trauma to complement the mountain of legal consequences still to come. Enjoying the evening? I sidled up to them with 2 fresh glasses of crisp Chardonnay, every inch the gracious hostess. Brielle accepted her drink, green eyes glinting with avarice. It's just the start of many more to come under our management. About that. I raised my glass in preparation for a toast. I believe I promised a special announcement tonight. Ethan's face broke into an eager grin, gobbling up the bait with reckless desperation. You finally saw the light. We're ready to lead the winery into a new prosperous era. Seizing the moment, I strode up onto the stage and seized the microphone, my voice amplifying across the hushed ballroom with authority. Esteemed guests, as many of you know, this gala celebrates not just the year's harvest, but the bonds of community, heritage, and family. I paused, letting the pregnant silence saturate the air like a heavy fog. Therefore, it is with great dismay I must reveal there are snakes in our midst. Pitching my voice to drip with disdain, I turned a piercing glare upon Ethan and Brielle's ashen faces. Snake who've been siphoning profits into offshore accounts and orchestrating an illegal sale to corporate raiders, all in a selfish ploy to steal what isn't theirs. The room erupted in shocked gasps and furious murmurs. Ethan gaped at me in abject horror, his knees visibly trembling. Score 1 for catching the rats by surprise. But take heart, my friends, I continued, allowing a vindicated smile. For I've spent months unraveling this scheme and constructed a righteous counterattack to preserve the heart and soul of Connor Vineyards. And as we speak, law enforcement is en route to apprehend the conspirators and abate this betrayal once and for all. That caused another thunderous roar to swell, this one of cheers and applause from the assembled guests. Ethan and Brielle could only stand frozen, their traitorous aspirations rejected in the most grandiose, humiliating forum imaginable. This was more than just the death of their scheme, it was the public immolation of their dreams, their reputations irrevocably stained for all to witness. Smile widening to bask in their torment, I locked eyes with Ethan, allowing my voice to rise above the raucous din in one final damning declaration. And so ends the inglorious paths of those foolish enough to betray Connor Family Vineyards. The silence that followed my declaration was electric, charged with 1,000 unvoiced gasps and accusations. Every eye in the gala burned into Ethan and Brielle, the snakes exposed in their traitorous coils. Clutching the microphone, I drank in the moment, savoring their abject humiliation as event security closed in to apprehend them. There would be no escape, no last-minute reprieve to salvage their crumbling reputations. You lying bitch! Brielle exploded first, always the blazing tempest to Ethan's simmering tumult. Flecks of spittle flew from her snarling lips as she wheeled on me in impotent rage. How dare you? After everything our family sacrificed to build this place up from nothing. A cruel laugh burst from my chest, mocking and utterly devoid of mercy. Sacrificed? I echoed back at her venomous glare. By stealing and scheming behind my back to rob me of my rightful inheritance? If that's the extent of your sacrifices, then allow me to return the favor. Sweeping an arm out, I gestured to the assembled crowd staring in scandalized fascination. Esteemed guests, I give you Brielle Evans and Ethan Baxter, a contemptible pair of vipers who not only embezzled funds and orchestrated an illegal sale, but deluded themselves into thinking I'd simply hand over my legacy to their greedy clutches once the money hit my accounts. A fresh torrent of gasps and whispers rippled through the room, judgment and damnation raining down on the exposed snakes. No corner of this prestigious venue would offer them refuge, only the unforgiving glare of a community outraged by their insidious betrayal. Well, here's your wake-up call. I locked eyes with the fuming Bridal, jaw clenched to savor her swift descent into panicked realization. The Connors don't fold to snakes or sell our souls so easily. We have a pride and resilience that parasites like you could never comprehend. Dismissing her with a contemptuous sneer, I turned my scathing address toward the squirming Ethan. And you, my so-called husband-to-be, orchestrating a con to strip me of everything I've sacrificed for. Tell me, were you even attempting to mask your disloyalty, or just stringing me along like a blissfully ignorant puppet? Ethan opened his mouth to respond, but any protest withered on his ashen lips beneath my blistering glare. Save your platitudes, we both know the truth. You saw an opportunity for an easy payday. Damn whoever's lives or legacies got chewed up along the way. My fingers stabbed with each enunciated syllable, driving the humiliation deeper. Well, you miscalculated badly, Baxter, and now you'll reap the widespread ruination you've disgraced yourselves by earning. As if on cue, the ballroom doors flew open, revealing a grim-faced Marcia Blackwood flanked by county sheriff's deputies, the legal cavalry arriving to compound the conspirators' devastation. They swept forward as twin tidal waves of dread finally crested over Ethan and Brielle's masks of feigned innocence. Excuses and justifications died on their lips, choked off by the stark ramifications crashing down upon their elaborately orchestrated scheme. Ethan turned to me, momentarily unmasked in his desperation. "Avery, please." But I cut him off with a contemptuous slash of my hand. "I don't know who you are anymore, Ethan. Only that you're just another snake unworthy of my name or legacy." His shoulders slumped just before the deputies seized his arms, the dual blows of exposure and consequence robbing him of any final defiance. Fighting back a cruel smirk of satisfaction, I handed off the microphone to the approaching Marcia and stood tall, basking in the complete conquest over those who dared imperil everything I held sacred. The sight of Ethan and Brielle being led away in shackles amid a chorus of infuriated shouts branded itself into my memory like a searing brand. A watershed moment, their pathetic hopes and conniving snuffed out, the battlefield belonging solely to the righteous victor once more. In the days following the gala, a torrential downpour of consequences deluged Ethan and Brielle's shattered world. The dominoes I'd meticulously lined up for months toppled in devastating, unrelenting succession. First came the media crucifixion, a full-court blitz of skating exposés that left no damning stone unturned. Embezzlement figures, paper trails of illicit deals, and every unsavory allegation flooded the airwaves and newspapers. Then, the corporate clients and investors rapidly distanced themselves from the toxic fallout. Distributors and joint ventures severed ties as if the conniving snakes had developed a virulent, untreatable plague. Lucrative contracts evaporated overnight, closing off any potential lifelines or escape routes. Within a week, the once burgeoning empire Ethan and Brielle envisioned lay smoldering on the funeral pyre of their treacherous designs. Watching the dominoes spiral from my winery office's floor-to-ceiling windows, I sipped a crisp Chardonnay, smoky undertones from the Heritage Vineyards crop, complemented by the sweetness of hard-earned vindication. "It's all crumbling apart for them out there," Lucia murmured, mirroring my hawkish gaze. "Just like you said it would." "Of course." I swirled the glass, observing the pale liquid's lazy eddies. "Snakes like Ethan and Brielle slither on instinct and impulse. They can't help reverting to their vile natures. Snakes need to be defanged and rendered harmless before they can contaminate the surrounding environment." Lucia's brow furrowed as she processed my detached analysis. "And you're just okay with doing that to your own cousin? Your ex-fiancé?" A wintry smirk tugged at the corners of my lips. "I am the master of this vineyard, Lucia. Those sorts of personal entanglements and sentiments are luxuries I cannot afford to entertain, not when the stakes are so monumental." Shaking her head slowly, she shifted her gaze back outside. "I don't know how you have the stomach for it. All this, coldly dismantling their lives." "It's not about vengeance or settling scores," I replied evenly. This was always about upholding the values and legacy my father imparented upon these vines. Some degradation simply cannot be allowed to take root. A brief lull stretched between us as the enormity of the situation resonated. After a few thoughtful sips, I broke the silence. We're in the final throes now. Ethan and Brielle's reputations are decimated beyond repair, their underhanded ambitions rendered stillborn. My finger traced the path of a large truck pulling away from a nearby warehouse, the last dribbles being siphoned off their illicit overseas accounts and asset seizures. Soon, their ill-gotten windfalls will be returned to their rightful place, and they'll be left as they began, common graspers stripped of all influence and credibility. A grim smile etched across my features as I envisioned them reaping the whirlwind of their own making. No prison could confine them as completely as the reputations and futures they'd willingly immolated on the altar of greed and treachery. Every eye would forever gaze upon them and see only the parasites who betrayed family and legacy for a quick payday, irredeemable snakes expelled from their padded Eden into the wilderness of permanent societal exile. A more comprehensive immolation than anything I could have orchestrated by sheer force of will. "It's the perfect karmic justice," I declared, clinking my glass against Lucia's in a muted toast. "They'll never hold power or influence in this valley or respected circles ever again." As the crystal chimed, my gaze drifted over the sprawling vineyards basking in the valley's reflected emerald glow. The spark of renewal and reinvigoration already gathered on the horizon, possibilities blossoming like a new bountiful harvest yet to be plucked. My family's righteous legacy endured, burnished anew while the snakes shriveled and expired, warnings to any who dared stake foolish claims against its roots. I would ensure the winery's spiritual heart stemmed strong and proud in the aftermath. This land and its fruits would continue upholding the honored Connor's name long after Ethan and Brielle faded from memory like the meaningless parasites they were. Order had been restored, karmic balance achieved with a ruthless, defensive precision. In the aftermath of Ethan and Brielle's disgrace, an unsettled quiet descended upon the vineyards, the calm before a new season of growth and rebirth took root. I stood alone amid the pruned vines, calloused fingers tracing the gnarled bark, as the first whispers of spring's rejuvenation danced on the crisp morning breeze. The heady, fertile scents served as a poignant reminder of the perpetual cycles governing our world. Decay always preceded new life flourishing from the fallow remnants. Closing my eyes, I inhaled deeply and permitted myself a faint, rueful smile. Ethan and Brielle were experiencing that harsh transition now, reaping the bitter harvest they'd sown through arrogance and betrayal. Once vitally connected to this sacred valley's lifeblood, they now found themselves permanently severed, withered husks left behind as the next evolution in Connor Vineyards progressed without them. "You look entirely too philosophical for someone clutching pruning shears." Anthony's gruff voice shook me from my reverie. I cracked open one eye to find the cantankerous old vintner shuffling up beside me, shotgun slung over his shoulder in his usual curmudgeonly fashion. "Just savoring the turning of seasons," I replied, nodding toward the replenished vines already studding with pale green buds, contemplating the cycles that govern all aspects of life. Anthony snorted, hawking a thick globule of phlegm into the pristine soil. "If you're searching for some grand metaphor about your jackass ex-fiancé and money-grubbing cousin, you're barking up the wrong goddamn vineyard." I fought back a chuckle, recognizing Anthony's typical bluster. "Not at all," I assured him, merely appreciating the moments of peace and clarity before we dive headlong into another demanding harvest. The brusque old man gave a grudging nod, squinting out over the sea of vibrant green shoots stretching toward the horizon. "Well, at least you finally evicted those parasitic rats mucking about in the wine cellar," he growled. "Spat enough dealing with aphids and mildew without vermin infestations threatening to strangle the whole operation." His crass wisdom struck an unexpected chord of sanguine appreciation within me. Somehow, Anthony's earthy pragmatism invoked the spirit of these lands more than any fragrant spring zephyr or poetic Renaissance musings could muster. Some legacies endured not through florid romanticisms, but by the hard-bitten determination to preserve their essence through every cycle of death and rebirth. Dad had that stubborn tenacity, and now, in the aftermath of my own battle to safeguard our proudest fruits, it seemed I had awoken to it as well. Nodding toward the distant winery complex peeking over the knolls, I voiced the conviction blossoming in my chest. I want to expand our attractions and hospitality ventures, I declared. Lavish new visitor experiences to take this place to even greater heights. Show the world we're not some quaint foothill boutique, but a leading cultural anchor as timeless as the grapes we cultivate. Anthony regarded me with one bushy thing eyebrow arched. Mighty ambitious talk, Miss Connor. A cantankerous smirk tugged at the corner of his cracked lips. Hope you've got the grit to back it up once the snakes come slithering back. My fingers tightened around the pruning shear's worn wooden grip, drawing reassuring strength from its hewn permanence. I'm counting on it, I replied with a feral grin. The vines and soil have tasted treachery. They'll never allow anything besides the purest offerings to take nourishment again. Let the serpents bare their fangs, we'll simply lop off their skulls and continue flourishing as we were meant to. Anthony held my gaze for a long moment before unleashing a gravely chuckle that reverberated across the peaceful vineyard like a rollicking thunderclap. Well, I'll be damned, he sputtered between wheezing guffaws. You've finally grown a nice pair of Attire Italian grapes, haven't you, girl? My laughter joined his, the twin reverberations mingling and trilling through the awakening vines, harbingers of the revitalized spirit and enterprise taking root. As our mirth gradually subsided into a comfortable quiet, I gazed out over my family's verdant domain with a renewed sense of purpose igniting within. No longer would I merely aim to preserve these hallowed lands. That passive existence felt unbefittingly hollow in the wake of my trials. From the ashes of duplicity and desecration, a new, more ambitious path beckoned to be forged, one that would elevate Connor Vineyards to unprecedented glories and esteem its founder could scarcely have envisioned. But I sensed Dad's spirit smiling down upon the endeavor, regardless, for he would surely recognize the resilience and singular drive propelling his heir's ascent from turmoil to triumph. The snakes had been vanquished. Now it was time for the phoenix to stretch its wings and soar toward new promised harvests. You're useless, Layla. Absolutely useless, Ronan sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. I fought back the tears stinging my eyes, refusing to show weakness in front of his family. 7 months pregnant, I had felt a wave of dizziness wash over me and needed to sit down. Instead of concern, my husband's reaction was filled with disdain. Look at her, can't even stand up straight carrying my child. Ronan's parents, Mason and Lila, remained stone-faced, offering no defense. The rest of the family averted their eyes, an uncomfortable silence filling the room. It was supposed to be a celebratory dinner, bringing the extended family together before the baby's arrival. But like most family gatherings, it became another exhibition of Ronan's cruelty towards me. Your grandchild, I corrected him sharply. Or did you forget I'm carrying your daughter? Ronan rolled his eyes. If it was a son, it might actually be worth something. Gasps rippled through the room, but Ronan seemed unfazed by his callous remark. I felt a sharp kick from my unborn daughter, as if she could sense her father's indifference. Mustering all my strength, I rose to my feet, steadying myself against the table. How dare you diminish the value of your own child before she's even born? Ronan barked out a laugh. Value? You've contributed nothing of value, Layla. I'm the one who built this family, this company. What have you done besides be a dead weight? His words cut deep, dredging up years of belittling comments and meaning behavior I had endured. But this time felt different. A line had been crossed. As I looked around at his family's impassive faces, I realized they didn't see me as one of their own, just a vessel for Ronan's heir, at least until he decided I had outlived my use. That's when I caught Sienna's eye from across the room. My sister-in-law offered a subtle nod of solidarity, the hint of a defiant smirk playing across her lips. In that moment, I knew she recognized Ronan's manipulation for what it was, toxic and abusive. You're right, Ronan, I said steadily. I haven't contributed anything of value. I paused, letting the weight of my next words sink in. Not to you, at least. His brow furrowed in confusion as I turned my focus to the rest of the family. But this child, this daughter you've already dismissed, she is valuable. She's my future, a future free from any of you. The room fell into an uneasy hush as I mustered every ounce of conviction. I'm done being treated as worthless. My daughter and I deserve better. With that, I strode out of the room, the dull roar of Ronan's objections fading behind me. A weight had lifted, and for the first time in a long while, I felt in control of my own destiny. The path ahead was uncertain, but no longer would I accept being diminished and devalued. After years of allowing Ronan's toxic presence to define me, I was finally ready to redefine myself and show my daughter what it truly means to be a woman of strength. No more complacency or fear, only determination to rise above. In the days following that fateful dinner, I found myself questioning everything about my marriage to Ronan. His callous disregard for our unborn daughter laid bare the true depths of his cruelty and lack of empathy. This man, who was supposed to be my partner for life, had reduced me to little more than an object, a disposable vessel for producing his heir. But I was done being disposed of. That night, after leaving his vitriolic family behind, I had marched straight to the home office and began digging into our finances. What I uncovered shook me to my core. Evidence of Ronan's rampant financial mismanagement and deceit that spanned years. Hidden offshore accounts, falsified business records, illegal money trails, all carefully obscured. "You lying snake," I muttered, poring over the damning documents. Just then I heard the telltale click of his study door opening. Well, look who's still awake burning the midnight oil." Ronan sauntered in, arf thinly veiled derision lacing his words. "I figured you'd be too busy wallowing after your little tantrum the other night." My hands trembled with rage, clutching the financial records like a shield. "You're one to talk about tantrums. Your own toddler outbursts have funded this." I shoved the documents towards him. "Care to explain all this, dear husband?" Ronan's eyes widened as he flipped through the incriminating pages. For a split second, panic flashed across his face before his expression contorted into one of snide amusement. "Finally did some digging, did you?" He chuckled darkly. "I'll give you this much. You're not as big of an idiot as I thought." "Don't play dumb with me," I spat. "I know about the money laundering, the shady business deals, all of it. You've been lying to me from the start." Ronan simply shrugged, unperturbed. "So, those were necessary evils to get to where I am now. All you had to do was play the role of the devoted little wife. But you always did have trouble following directions." His brazen admission, devoid of any morsel of guilt or shame, was like a viper's strike to my heart. How could I have been so blind, so utterly naive to the depths of Ronan's moral depravity? "You selfish, heartless bastard," I seethed, fists clenched. "Did you ever love me at all? Or was I always just a means to an end in your grand game of lies and deceit?" A cruel smirk played across his thin lips. "Now you're catching on. But you're giving yourself too much credit, pet. You were a convenient accessory, a pretty ornament to adorn my winning success story. Nothing more." White-hot anger flooded my veins as the weight of his treachery washed over me in waves. This man didn't deserve an ounce of my loyalty or affection, not after everything he'd done, all the ways he'd betrayed and belittled me. And in that moment, I made a vow to myself and to my unborn daughter. I would bring this whole rotten edifice crashing down around him. Ronan wanted to see me as worthless, as nothing more than a means to an end. Fine, I would show him just how ruinous being underestimated could be. Rising to my feet, I met his cold stare with white-hot defiance blazing in my eyes. "You're going to regret the day you ever crossed me, Ronan. This..." I waved the documents with contempt. "All of this is going to be your undoing. No more hiding, no more lies. I'm going to make sure everyone sees you for the soulless snake that you truly are." Ronan let out a contemptuous bark of laughter, seemingly unfazed by my declaration of war. But I could see the slightest flicker of uncertainty in those beady eyes of his. Good, the first embers of fear had been stoked. My path was now clear. It was time to rally my forces, gather my allies, and enact the grand unraveling of Ronan Jacobs' carefully cultivated lies. The reversal of his ill-gotten fortunes was going to be deliciously karmic, and I would be the orchestrator of his downfall, just as he had been the architect of my dehumanization. The great game of revenge was only just beginning. In the aftermath of my explosive confrontation with Ronan, I found myself at a crossroads. His web of deceit surrounding the family business was so intricately spun, taking him down would require more than just my resolve. I needed an inside source, an ally with intimate knowledge to counteract his uncle's shadowy machinations. That's when Sienna entered the picture. My sister-in-law had been sidelined by Ronan and the family elders for years, deemed too headstrong and independent for their antiquated tastes. But her marginalization shielded her from their corruption, allowing her to see the rot festering at the core with striking clarity. I reached out to her a few days after discovering Ronan's illicit financial records, suggesting we meet for lunch to catch up. Sienna, ever perceptive, seemed to sense the weight behind my request. "So what's really going on, Layla?" she asked once we were seated at a quiet cafe, her eyes narrowed with cautious curiosity. "This can't just be a social call after what went down at your dad's place." Exhaling slowly, I pulled out the now dog-eared folder and slid it across the table towards her. "See for yourself. Ronan's lies run much deeper than any of us realized." Sienna's brow furrowed as she flipped through the damning pages, her expression oscillating between disbelief and anger. When she finally looked up at me, her green eyes were blazing with righteous fury. "That arrogant, chauvinistic prick," she hissed, slamming the folder shut. "I knew he was a bastard, but this is a new low, even for him." A rueful smile tugged at the corner of my lips. It felt vindicating to have someone finally see Ronan's treachery for what it was. "You and me both. That's why I need your help taking him down." Sienna cocked an eyebrow quizzically. "My help? Why come to me?" "Because you're one of the few people with a frontline view into the family's dealings," I said frankly. "With your insight into their illegal activities, we'd have a better chance of exposing Ronan's lies and watching the whole corrupt edifice crumble." For a long moment, Sienna studied me appraisingly before letting out a bitter chuckle. "Gotta hand it to you. You've got a set of steel ovaries going up against Ronan like this." Her gaze turned flinty, burning with years of repressed resentment towards my husband and his family. "I'm in. It's high time that misogynistic prick got taken down a few pegs." Relief washed over me, knowing I had a co-conspirator, and a fiercely capable one at that. With Sienna's insider knowledge combined with my evidence, we would be an undeniable force to be reckoned with. "So what's the plan?" she asked, leaning in conspiratorially. "How do you want to dismantle this cancer infecting our family?" A feral grin spread across my face as I laid out my initial strategy. Lawsuits, information leaks to the press, back-channel communications to law enforcement, nothing was off the table. Like Jenga pieces, we would systematically extract the foundational blocks underlying Ronan's empire until the entire decrepit tower came crashing down around him. Sienna listened intently, offering insights and recommendations along the way. Our partnership was quickly solidifying into a potent alliance, two wronged women joining forces to enact poetic justice. "You know there's no turning back after this, right?" Sienna cautioned once I finished laying out my plan. "Ronan's going to come after us, after you, with everything he has left." I felt my daughter kick insistently from within my womb, as if lending her strength and conviction to my cause. With a resolute nod, I met Sienna's gaze head-on. "Let him try," I said, cold determination lacing my voice. "I'm done running scared. It's time for Ronan to learn what happens when you back a mother into a corner." Sienna flashed me a wolfish grin, her eyes glinting with feral approval. "Well then, let's make that bastard pay." And with that, the gears of our intricately weaved con were set in motion. Ronan's downfall was now inevitable. He just didn't know it yet. With Sienna as my co-conspirator, the wheels were in motion to demolish Ronan's empire of lies and deceit. But exposing him wouldn't be a simple task. We needed to lay the groundwork meticulously, shoring up our defenses while weakening his position through strategic strikes. Over the following weeks, Sienna and I became a well-oiled machine. She provided insider intelligence on the family's illegal dealings, while I leveraged my financial evidence to start building a comprehensive case against Ronan. Money trails, damning documentation, back-channel whispers to law enforcement, everything was falling into place. I also began lining up allies in preparation for the inevitable battle to come. Some were easy to recruit, like Sienna's younger brother Caleb, who had long resented Ronan's boorish behavior. Others were more hesitant, but the weight of the evidence against my husband ultimately proved convincing. "This is some heavy stuff, Lay." Jen, my best friend since childhood, muttered as she pored over the paper trail detailing Ronan's fraud. You know he's going to fight this tooth and nail, right? That's the plan, I replied grimly. He's going to realize just how big of a mistake it was underestimating what a woman's scorn can accomplish. Jen shook her head in disbelief. I knew that asshole was a piece of work, but money laundering? Illegal business dealings? Jesus. Her gaze turned serious as she looked up at me. You sure you're ready for the fallout that comes with taking him down like this? He could try to take everything. Your money, the baby. My hand instinctively went to my swollen belly as I felt my daughter shift inside me. That was the entire crux of this mission, wasn't it? To ensure she would never have to suffer the same toxic mistreatment I had endured. To build her a life free of Ronan's poisonous influence. He doesn't get to decide what's best for my child, not anymore, I said firmly. If he wants a war, he's going to get one, and I don't intend to lose. Jen studied me appraisingly for a long moment before giving a resolute nod. Then you've got my full support. Let's take that bastard down. With more allies rallying to the cause, our efforts started bearing fruit. A scathing expose in the local paper cast scrutiny on Ronan's business affairs. Anonymous tips triggered preliminary IRS and SEC investigations. I could sense the walls closing in around him, his confidence gradually fracturing. It all came to a head one evening when Ronan stormed into the house, his face contorted into a mask of frothing rage. You just couldn't leave well enough alone, could you? He snarled, violently slamming his briefcase onto the table. You had to go and poke your nose where it didn't belong. I stared at him impassively, cradling my pregnant belly. That's rich, coming from you. I'm simply bringing your shady dealings into the light. You conniving little bitch! Ronan's sudden roar made me flinch. You think you've won? That you can take everything I've built and destroy it on a whim? He closed the distance between us, his meaty hand gripping my arm in a vice-like grip. I'll bury you before you can take one more step, do you hear me? This family, this life, it's all mine. You're nothing. His spittle flew in my face as I met his crazed stare with steely defiance. We'll see about that. With a disgusted grunt, Ronan shoved me away and stormed out, leaving me to rub the spot where his fingers had dug into my flesh. I felt my daughter kick anxiously, as if she could sense the tension and rage radiating off her father. Don't worry, sweetie, I murmured, gently rubbing my belly to soothe her. That's the last time he'll ever get to hurt us. The game was afoot, the battle lines clearly drawn. There would be no turning back now. Ronan's ignorant arrogance had opened the door for his downfall. Soon, very soon, everything he'd schemed and clawed for would be ashes at his feet. And from those ashes, I would rise, his conquering phoenix, mercilessly guiding the path of his self-immolation. Despite Ronan's blustering threats, Sienna and I refused to let up the pressure. With our meticulous groundwork laid over the past weeks, all we needed was the right catalyst to detonate the explosive truth and bring the full force of our retaliation crashing down. That spark arrived in the most unlikely of places, a goddamn family event, of all things. It was one of those obnoxious high society galas the Jacobs clan used for thinly veiled vanity showcasing. A garish display of old money and entitlement under the guise of charity that made my skin crawl. Ronan, desperate to maintain appearances, had all but demanded my attendance, claiming it would soften the growing PR onslaught against him. So there I was, 7.5 months pregnant, squeezed into an uncomfortably tight dress and trotted out like some grotesque show pony to help resuscitate my husband's wilting image. The hypocrisy was galling, but I played along, for now. The night itself was a sordid parade of self-congratulatory speeches and pathetic social climbing, exactly as I'd expected. I found myself growing increasingly lightheaded and nauseous, thanks to a combination of my condition and the sickeningly opulent atmosphere. Sienna, I need some air, I muttered, struggling to conceal my discomfort. Being around these vapid vultures is making me ill. You just say the word and we're out of here, she replied with a reassuring squeeze of my arm. This whole charade is utter bullshit anyway. Nodding gratefully, I excused myself from the overcrowded ballroom and made my way towards the balcony doors, each step feeling heavier than the last. I was nearly there when a grimy hand clamped around my elbow, whipping me around forcefully. Just where do you think you're going? Ronan sneered, his tuxedo hanging open sloppily and his breath reeking of whiskey. "Your little disappearing act is going to make us look bad." I wrenched my arm free from his grasp, defiant anger flaring. "Us? Don't flatter yourself, Ronan. You're the only one with an image to protect here, and at great cost, it seems." He threw his head back with a contemptuous bark of laughter. "Oh, spare me the self-righteous melodrama, would you? I'm doing what's necessary to maintain the family legacy." "Your legacy is mired in lies and illegal money, you degenerate." I shot back, fighting the wave of dizziness washing over me. "How many more laws do you plan to break, just to feather your filthy nest?" Ronan's face contorted in an ugly sneer. "Watch your tone when speaking to me, you ungrateful whore." The vile insult was cut off as a searing pain lanced through my abdomen, forcing me to double over with a strangled cry. Instantly, the room started spinning sickeningly as I clutched at my stomach. "Oh God, something's wrong." I whimpered through gritted teeth, panic seizing my chest. "The baby. I think she's coming." For one infinitesimal moment, Ronan's scowl slipped just enough for the briefest flicker of concern to register on his face. But it was quickly extinguished as his mask of disdain slammed back into place. "Of course you'd choose now for this pathetic drama queen act," he growled, making no move to help me. "Just another attention grab like always." I could scarcely believe his callous reaction through the haze of agony racking my body. "Ronan, please, I need help." From somewhere behind me I heard Sienna's urgent voice calling my name as she rushed to my side. "Layla! Oh my God, what's going on?" Her eyes went wide with panic as she quickly assessed the situation. "We need to get you to a hospital now." Ronan simply stood back, arms folded across his chest, with a sneer of derision painted across his smug features. "Don't bother," he spat venomously. "She's clearly just trying to stir up another scene. Pathetic even for you, Layla." White-hot rage cut through the pain as Sienna helped me up, glaring daggers at my wretched husband. "You heard the lady. She needs medical attention, asshole!" she shouted, somehow managing to steady my trembling form. "Are you really that much of a bastard that you're going to let your own child suffer?" His only response was a disdainful curl of his lip and a dismissive wave of his hand. And in that moment, any lingering shred of affection or loyalty I might have harbored for Ronan Jacobs dissipated into the ether. Through the tumultuous storm of agony and mounting rage, one thought rang out with piercing clarity. This petty, narcissistic monster could no longer be allowed to slither through this life unchecked. Not after everything he'd done, every reprehensible betrayal and cruelty I had endured at his hands. As Sienna half-carried, half-dragged me out of that wretched gala, the air thick with horrified murmurs from onlookers, I knew with every fiber of my being that there would be no quarter given, no more playing by his rules, operating within his corrupt boundaries. From this night forward, the delicate campaign of attrition would give way to an all-out scorched earth offensive. Ronan's downfall was no longer a question of if, but when. And I would be the White Walkyrie leading the charge over the charred remains of his pathetic existence until only ash and ruin remained. After the disastrous gala where Ronan so callously disregarded my health and our unborn child's well-being, any pretense of civility between us disintegrated into acrid dust. With Sienna's help, I had been rushed to the hospital, the doctors just barely managing to halt my premature labor. But that horrific night proved to be the flashpoint, the spark that ignited the wildfire of our intricately laid revenge plot. While I recovered under Sienna's watchful care, she began systematically executing the final phases of our operation, unloading salvo after salvo of damning evidence, whistleblower accounts, and criminal documentation onto the appropriate channels. Authorities, journalists, corporate watchdogs, no stone was left unturned as she mercilessly exposed the staggering depths of Ronan's duplicity and criminality. The dominoes began falling rapidly after that, one by one, until an unstoppable chain reaction took hold. SEC investigations gave way to federal grand juries, which then triggered disastrous civil lawsuits and IRS tax fraud probes. What had once been a contained snuff operation ballooned into an all-consuming inferno that threatened to engulf Ronan's entire empire of lies. And at the center of that conflagration stood the man himself, eyes bulging with impotent rage as he watched everything he'd conned and swindled for decades up in acrimonious smoke. You? You meddlesome bitch, he roared, slamming his meaty fist onto the desk during one of his increasingly frequent tantrums. You've ruined everything. My life's work, our legacy. It's all ashes because of your insipid vendetta. I regarded him stoically from across the office, completely unmoved by his theatrics. You have no one to blame but yourself, Ronan. Your greed and hubris were your own undoing, not me. His beady eyes narrowed to slits as he rose from behind his desk on unsteady feet. Don't play innocent with me, Layla. I know you were behind this. All of this. He gestured wildly at the stacks of legal notices and indictments littering every surface, debris from the smoldering remains of his diseased empire. You and that venomous snake, Sienna. We simply exposed the truth you worked so hard to bury, I countered coolly. Did you really think you could run this criminal farce indefinitely without any consequences? Ronan bared his teeth in an approximation of a snarl as he closed the distance between us. Up close, I could smell the reek of cheap whiskey and nervous sweat wafting off his disheveled form, a pitiful shell of the formerly sleek, intimidating con man whose fear I had lived in for so many years. You arrogant little... His slurred insult was cut off as a tiny, mewling cry pierced the air. My newborn daughter shifting restlessly in her carrier beside me. I shot him a withering glare, squaring my shoulders protectively. That's enough out of you, not another vulgarity in front of my child. I fixed him with an icy stare, letting the unspoken threat resonate. You've inflicted enough trauma on this family. For a long, tense moment, we simply stared each other down, the snarling, feral beast backed into an inescapable corner, and the predator calmly observing its final throes. At last, Ronan seemed to wilt beneath the weight of crushing defeat clouding his gaze. Damn you, he spat bitterly, slumping back against his desk with a dull thud. Damn you and that bastard child to hell. As if on cue, Sienna strode into the room, eyes flashing as she took in the tense scene before her. Everything okay in here? Shooting Ronan one final look of disgust, I turned to face my co-conspirator and gave a tight nod. Never better. Just tying up some loose ends with the soon-to-be former Mr. Jacobs. A wicked grin split Sienna's features as she regarded her disgraced cousin with undisguised glee. Well, don't let me interrupt the reckoning. By all means, allow me to join in verbally eviscerating the sniveling husk of this pathetic, arrogant worm. She leveled a mocking glare at Ronan. Go on, you gaping asshole. What other lies do you have left to try and peddle? Ronan simply glowered in impotent rage, clenching and unclenching his fists. The faintest mutters of denial and heated curses escaped his trembling lips, but it was obvious the fight had left him. His will, his decades-long charade of power and dominance, had finally been irrevocably shattered. Turning my back to his crumpled, mumbling form, I bent down to tenderly scoop up my slumbering infant daughter, cradling her against my chest as a fierce wave of protectiveness washed over me. She was my everything now, my sole purpose, and all that mattered in this miserable world. And in that moment, I silently swore to whatever higher power that may exist, that my precious girl would never have to endure the trauma of Ronan's toxicity or fall under the twisted clutches of his family legacy. The karma he had wrought through his lifetime of malice and depravity was his cross to bear, not hers. Come on, Sienna, let's go home. There's nothing left for us among the ashes of Ronan's ruin. I spared one last contemptuous glance over my shoulder at the wretched, sniveling husk that was once my husband. This one can stew in his self-made purgatory alone. With a curt nod, Sienna fell into step beside me as we strode from the smoldering ruins of Ronan's decrepit empire. Behind us, I could feel his seething gaze burning impotently into the back of my skull. But I didn't falter, didn't dare look back. There was nothing for me amid that scorched earth, only the bright future awaiting my daughter and I beyond the caustic smoke of karmic justice. In the aftermath of Ronan's spectacular downfall, the shockwaves rippled through every facet of our lives. The legal and financial fallout had left his family's empire in irreparable ruin. Corporate entities dissolved, assets seized, reputations permanently disgraced. And at the eye of this hurricane of destruction stood Ronan himself, a bitter, sneering shell temporarily insulated by the last vestiges of his ill-gotten wealth as he licked his wounds. But even that protection was a rapidly dwindling facade. The incoming crush of criminal charges and civil litigation saw to that. I lost count of the visits from court officers, federal agents, and process servers darkening my doorstep, each one armed with another ream of subpoenas and legal filings squarely aimed at dismantling what little remained of Ronan's crumbling facade. His standard modus operandi of dismissive sneers and hollow legal threats gave way to panicked outbursts, increasingly erratic behavior, and even interventions from law enforcement when his rage spiraled out of control. "This isn't over, Layla," he roared at me through a haze of spittle during one such unhinged meltdown, eyes wild like a cornered animal. "I'll bury you in litigation for the rest of your miserable life. You'll never be free of me." Staring impassively back at him through the doorway, I didn't so much as flinch as I cradled our infant daughter protectively against my chest. "Is that so? Because from where I'm standing, it seems your options for retaliation are rapidly evaporating." "Don't get smug with me, you disloyal little cunt." Ronan's voice cracked with raw fury. "Everything I had, everything I built, it's all in ruins now, because of you. But I'll make sure you suffer just as badly before this is through. Mark my words." "Tell me, Ronan, do you honestly think threatening me is going to restore your dignity at this point?" I arched a challenging brow. "I've thoroughly dismantled any illusion of you being an intimidating presence. You're already living your worst nightmare, destitute and alone, unmourned and reviled for your reprehensible actions." He opened his mouth to retort, but I cut him off with an imperious sweep of my free hand. "Enough with the hollow bravado. We both know that deep down, you're nothing more than a coward and a charlatan whose house of cards has finally collapsed under its own weight." Pausing, I allowed the weight of my next words to resonate. "I'd tell you to give my regards to your cellmates, but something tells me they'll be able to smell the stench of your vileness a mile away." For a fleeting instant, something akin to naked fear flickered behind Ronan's eyes, but the split-second glimpse into what fragile sliver of humanity he had left was quickly snuffed out, his ferocious mask of feral defiance slamming back into place. "You'll get yours, Layla. One way or another, I'll make sure of that," he snarled. "No bitch takes everything from Ronan Jacobs and gets away with it unscathed." "Is that so?" A wry smile tugged at the corners of my mouth. "We'll see about that." With one last contemptuous glare, Ronan whirled on his heel and stormed off, the once imposing figure cutting an increasingly diminutive presence with each passing day. I watched him leave unflinchingly, the weight of victory granting me a tranquil resolve I had once struggled to find amid his toxic shadow. As the fury of his exit faded into stony silence, my daughter began fussing softly against my chest. Gently shushing her, I nuzzled her downy head and hummed a tender tune until her squirms subsided into peaceful slumber once more. In that simple, serene moment, my purpose and drive crystallized into an inviolable truth. Everything I had endured, every wound and sacrifice along this tumultuous path, had all been for her. To build a world where she would never know the corrosive touch of Ronan's cruelty or malignance. A world where her limitless potential and soaring spirit would be nurtured, not bound in chains. It was then that I made an irrevocable vow, one that would guide the next phase of mine and my daughter's shared journey towards healing and vindication. "I'm going to make sure that he spends the rest of his empty days withering behind bars where he belongs," I murmured, pressing a gentle kiss to my little girl's head. "And in doing so, I'll cleanse every last vestige of his poison from our lives." "You'll never have to know the person I was before you came along, sweetie." For far too long, the scales had been tipped decisively in Ronan's favor, my light perpetually eclipsed by the suffocating gravity of his toxicity. But in dismantling his vile empire through ruthless, strategic strikes, the karmic rebalancing had begun. Now it was time to reject his cancerous influence entirely and reclaim my destiny as the self-actualized woman and mother I was always meant to become. No more entertaining his hollow legal threats or humoring his pathetic machinations from the sidelines. No more relics from the life he had claimed for me through subjugation and fear. It was time for Ronan Jacobs to at long last reap the full consequences of his cruelty and deception, without mercy or compromise. Only then could my new chapter truly begin, a tale authored by my own steadfast convictions, free from the shackles of his arrogance and malice. As the first rays of dawn crested over the horizon, my path forward was bathed in brilliant clarity. There would be no steering from this inexorable road, no wavering amid the scattered ashes of Ronan's shattered reality. The metamorphosis was complete. Like a phoenix born anew from the purifying annihilation of his transgressions, my wings were finally unfurled and poised to carry us both into a future of boundless possibility. And this time there was no force in existence that could extinguish the radiant flame of justice and redemption blazing before us. The days and weeks following Ronan's disgrace blurred together in a whirlwind of activity as I systematically extricated every remaining tentacle of his poisonous presence from our lives. The divorce proceedings were inevitably messy and drawn out, colored by one bad faith legal maneuver after another, as my now thoroughly disgraced ex-husband grasped at any remaining shred of leverage. But flanked by an impeccably prepared legal team and emboldened by Sienna's stalwart support, his pathetic delaying tactics proved futile. In the end, the courts had little sympathy to spare for a man whose reprehensible actions had been laid bare so publicly. Within 6 months, the divorce decree was ironclad. Full custody of our daughter, a sizable monetary settlement from what meager funds remained attachable after all the asset seizures, and every last thread connecting me to that rotting family legacy unceremoniously severed. I was finally free from the insidious manipulation, the demeaning insults and abuse, the generational cycle of toxicity Ronan had tried so desperately to entrench us both in. As the last mote of legal dust scattered, I felt an unbearable weight dissipate, replaced by an electrifying surge of possibility and newfound liberty. This life, this miraculous second chance, was ours and ours alone to author. No longer would I allow Ronan's cancerous presence to dictate the boundaries of our realm. With my meager savings and the settlement funds, I wasted no time leaving that wretched city in the rear view, desperate to put as many miles between us and those harrowing memories as possible. A quaint but comfortable home in the mountains was my chosen fresh start, a place to breathe and find tranquility among the hushed pines and crisp alpine air. Sienna came with me on that maiden voyage to my new sanctuary, helping me settle in and bearing witness to the dawning of this new reality we had fought so tenaciously to manifest. Not bad for your stakes of the winnings, all things considered, she remarked with a roguish grin as we lounged on the cabin's spacious back patio, our contented niece gurgling happily in her arms. Just a consolation prize, really, I replied with a dismissive wave of my hand, lazily sipping a glass of crisp white wine as I surveyed the breathtaking vista of evergreen trees rolling off into the distance. The true bounty is the regained peace of mind, something money alone could never buy. Sienna shot me an appraising look, nodding slowly. You've come a long way from that demure, broken-winged sparrow Ronan tried so hard to keep clipped all those years. Not sure I've ever seen a phoenix's ascension up close like this before. Just be glad you were on my side of the bonfire when this whole warpath started, I chuckled ruefully, twisting in my seat to meet her gaze. I shudder to think how ruthless the retribution would have been if you'd been added to the list of co-conspirators. We shared a loaded look, one that spoke volumes to the depths of conviction and camaraderie that had driven our crusade of righteous vengeance over these past months. My unlikely ally had become an indispensable confidant and comrade in arms through the harshest throes of Ronan's sinister downfall. A true sister in every sense of the word. But enough about that narcissistic shit stain. I'm over the moon just to be putting that whole cancerous saga behind me, Sienna declared with an emphatic clink of her glass against mine. Here's to breathing that crisp, rejuvenating mountain air and never having to look over our shoulders again. I'll drink to that, I said with a contented sigh, leaning back to bask in the warmth of the mid-afternoon sun filtering through the trees. For the first time in a long while, I truly felt at peace. Over the ensuing months, I steadily regained my footing and settled into my new normal of single motherhood, with Sienna's unflagging moral and logistical support by my side every step of the way. There were still days where I would be struck by sudden pangs of loathing or repressed trauma over all Ronan had put me through, phantom echoes of his scathing taunts and demeaning insults rattling like pinballs through my psyche. Yet with every passing week, those haunting whispers grew more faint, more powerless against the brilliant blaze of self-actualization and fulfillment illuminating my path forward. Gradually, steadily, I rediscovered the pieces of the woman I had once been, before Ronan's poisonous influence had so thoroughly leached her ambitions and self-worth down to empty husks. With my daughter as my unbridled source of inspiration and Sienna's sage guidance, the core pillars of my identity were steadily being rebuilt from the ground up. I dove headfirst into pursuing the high-stakes financial career I had abandoned when the Jacobs clan asserted their odious sway over my life's trajectory. The fire to establish myself as a singularly brilliant market analyst and consultant raged hotter than ever before. Within 2 years, I had clawed my way back into the cutthroat arena of high finance, rapidly establishing a hard-won reputation as a fierce, savvy negotiator with an incisive and unflinching market instinct. Seemingly overnight, my fledgling boutique consultancy went from a homespun side hustle to a force to be reckoned with on the national stage. "You've got a preternatural gift for this stuff, you know?" Sienna remarked in an odd tone one evening as I exited yet another lucrative teleconference, 6 figures richer for an hour's worth of counsel. "The sheer brass one's on you to step back into this shark's den after everything you went through." I simply shrugged, my gaze drifting over to where my 5-year-old daughter lay curled up in contented slumber on the couch, clutching her favorite stuffed rabbit. They tried to break me, and nearly succeeded, mostly because I allowed them to. I'll be damned if I squander this second lease on life by needlessly limiting myself again. The raw truth of those words hung in the air for a heavy pause as we both watched my little girl's peaceful rising and falling beneath her tattered blanket. "Besides, I've got to set the bar high so this little munchkin knows just how brilliant and tenacious she can grow up to be," I continued wistfully. "Her future is the only inheritance that matters to me now. The rest is just excess noise." Meeting Sienna's proud gaze with a resolute nod of affirmation, I felt the last vestiges of doubt and fear permanently slough off, like the molted skin of a transcendent serpent. What had once been shameful shackles had been meticulously reworked into brilliant new armor, steeled against the harsh realities that still lurked beyond this sanctum. Because out there in that tumultuous world, the specter of Ronan Jacobs and his ilk still festered. Venal, vicious aberrations perpetually locked in conflict with the strength and integrity I now embodied. And while his individual chapter had been scribed into ignominious history, that eternal crusade waged on in others. But I was more than ready to face those battles anew with a cleansed spirit and crystalline clarity of purpose, to uplift and cultivate that divine spark of potential until it erupted into an all-consuming wildfire, burning away every last mote of indignity and fear. No more poisoned births or anguished gasps for air amid that choking miasma of societal toxicity. Only the radiant promise of new dawns, to be ushered in by champions of change and retribution, unshackled from the anchors of oppression. Because on that day, standing at the precipice of our boldly reclaimed destiny, I was no longer prey, just the merciless apex predator, continually reborn in a blaze of glory.